Welcome back to the Judgment Infrastructure podcast. In the last episode, we separated authority from popularity. Today, we build the compounding model. Because a podcast alone is not leverage, it is the starting layer. Today's question: how does a podcast become an authority flywheel? Or more precisely, how do you convert voice into structural leverage? Let's apply the 2080 rules. Part 1. What most people see. Most creators think the growth path look like this. Podcast to audience, to sponsorship, to revenue. That is a common model, but that model capped quickly. It depends on attention volatility. It depends on algorithm favor. It depends on constant visibility. That is not infrastructure. That is exposure dependency. Part 2. The critical 20%. Here is a structural 20%. Authority compound when voice convert into asset, not when voice convert into ads. The correct flywheel is podcast to book, to course, to consulting, to influence. Each layer increase leverage. Each layer stabilize authority. Each layer reduce volatility. This is not content creation. This is asset engineering. Part 3. 5 Why structural diagnosis. Let's apply 5 Why. Why 1. Why do most podcasts struggle to generate meaningful income? Because sponsorship revenue fluctuate. Why 2. Why does sponsorship fluctuate? Because it depends on audience size and engagement spike. Why 3. Why is audience size unstable? Because attention is platform control. Why 4. Why is the creator dependent on platform control? Because episodes were never converted into own asset. And why 5. Why were episodes not converted? Because podcasting was treated as media, not infrastructure. That is the root. Part 4. Layer 1. Podcast to book. Podcast episodes are raw thinking. Books are structured doctrine. When you extract recurring framework from your episode, cluster become chapter. Chapter become volumes. Volumes become authority anchors. Podcast build visibility. Book build permanence. Without documentation, your idea evaporates. With documentation, your idea stabilizes. Part 5. Layer 2. Book to course. Book explain. Courses operationalize. A course transform. Principle to process. Concept to application. Theory to capability. Courses create transformation loops. Transformations build trust. Trust strengthens positioning. Part 6. Layer 3. Course to consulting. Consulting is applied doctrine. If your podcast and book defines framework clearly, consulting becomes precision deployment, not improvisation. You are no longer selling time. You are applying structured thinking. Structured thinking commands premium positioning. Part 7. Layer 4. Consulting to influence. Influence is not follower count. Influence is a framework abduction. When organizations apply your vocabulary, use your model, reference your structure, you move beyond content. You shape decision. Decision shape is authority. Part 8. The 2080 application. The 20% that determine 80% of flywheel success. Asset extraction discipline. Cross-layer integration. Vocabulary consistency. Doctrine stability. Not marketing tactic. Not growth hacks. Not sponsorship volume. Compounding requires structure. Part 9. The flywheel versus funnel. Funnel push customer through. Flywheel build momentum. Funnel depends on constant input. Flywheel depends on structural reinforcement. If you stop promoting, funnel slow. If you stop speaking, flywheel still spin because asset remain. Authority flywheel reduce fragility. Part 10. Compounding model. Here is a compounding sequence. Episode introduce principle. Book consolidate principle. Courses operationalize principle. Consulting apply principle. Influence spread principle. Each layer reinforces the previous. Reinforcement increase gravity. Gravity attracts opportunity. Part 11. Long-term framing. Year 1. Podcast build recognition. Year 2. Book establish intellectual property. Year 3. Course and consulting deepen leverage. Year 5. Framework become reference standard. This is slow but durable. Durability defines authority. Part 12. Governance lesson. Every episode must answer, how does this connect to a larger asset? If episode remain isolated, the flywheel never forms. Extraction must be intentional. Integration must be scheduled. Conversion must be disciplined. Part 13. Practical implementation. To build your flywheel, first, tag episode by framework category. Second, extract quarterly recurring themes. Third, draft structure manuscript annually. Fourth, design course module from book chapter. Fifth, offer consulting aligned strictly to doctrine. Do not monetize randomly. Monetize structurally. Closing principle. Most creators chase income. Few build leverage. Income fluctuates. Leverage compound. A podcast is voice. Voice become doctrine. Doctrine become asset. Asset become influence. If you build the flywheel, attention becomes optional. Because authority becomes durable. Next week, we move into deeper integration, building the intellectual archive, indexing for multi-year compounding. Until then, extract before promoting. Convert before monetizing. Structure before scaling. This is the Judgment Infrastructure Podcast.